All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. My name is Jummy Adejuyigbe, and I'm really excited to be with you today to talk about becoming a cyber defender in application testing. And hopefully today I can help demystify and deconstruct the complexities perceived about application penetration testing. So this presentation really is for anyone interested in getting into cybersecurity, or if you're already in cybersecurity and you're looking for a change. So today I'll share with you a little bit about my journey, how I got into cybersecurity, and I'll also briefly go over changing technology landscape and share what a typical day in the life of an ethical hacker involves. And then we'll wrap it up with some common application vulnerabilities and tools and resources that you may find beneficial in this space. And hopefully I'll leave some time for some questions at the end. And feel free, you can type in your questions in the chat and I would try to get to them as we go. Great. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. This FDR quote really resonates with me because it just really speaks to the fact that we shouldn't let fear be the reason move in the direction of our dreams, or why we wouldn't try something new or learn something new. And this theme really is woven throughout my journey, and you see that as I share. So at the age of 10, I decided I would not be a doctor or a lawyer. And just to give you some context, right, I come from a background or from an environment where at a very early age, parents are telling their children that, this is what you're going to be when you grow up. You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And if you don't make any of those two, maybe we'll consider, you becoming an engineer. And all my friends really wanted to be doctors and lawyers, and I just really could not swim with that tide. And fortunately, at the age of 13, I got introduced to computers, DoS commands, basic programming, and the light bulb just went on. And it was like, this is what I would like to do. It just really connected with me. And at 14, I decided I was going to become a computer analyst. It's no brainer, right? If they're computers, they have to be people building computers, working on computers, doing stuff with computers. And I just really wanted to, do anything with computers. I decided to major in computer science, computer engineering, computer with maths, computer with economics. As long as it has computers with it, I was willing to take that on in my undergrad. Unfortunately, I did not get selected for any of the computer programs I had applied to. I had to study computer engineering physics. So I majored in engineering physics. So prior to going into major in engineering physics, I did not have a clue that engineering physics was a major. So it was the first time hearing about that, but I majored in engineering physics, and it was really the most challenging time of my existence. It was quite difficult. It was a very challenging program, but I'm thankful that they say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. That was a very difficult one to make lemonades out of, but I was able to successfully graduate and then decided to take a master's. So I took a master's in management information systems with a specialization in information security. And as I went into that program, I did intentionally connect with practitioners in the field. I was involved with the local ISACA chapter back then, and I got to know what the practitioners in the field, what their areas of specialization was, and also try to understand how they got to where they were. And I made an intentional step to mimic my career, with those areas that I felt I was quite interested in. And I got my first job as an IT auditor. It was a fun job, but then I really needed to do something more hands-on. Fortunately, I got hired to join the application vulnerability assessment team for a large financial institution. And in the course of that process, I did not have any background in application security or pen testing. So this was a big leap for me, a big jump for me. But then I got hired, they took a chance on me, and they trained me, which was great. It was fantastic. And within the course of a year after joining the team, I was made the team lead of the application vulnerability assessment team. In coming from a place where I knew absolutely nothing about app pen testing to a place where I was leading the team was really just due to the support that I received from my managers and my peers as well, just being open to learn something new. And today I lead a team with one of the big four consulting firms, leading the security assessment team, where my team is responsible for performing different types of assessment for the firm. So, and the reason why I share my story, why I think it's relevant, is because no matter what challenges come our way, we just have to keep moving in the direction of our dreams, regardless of the obstacles, and also observe and learn from the practitioners in the field, in the space you're interested in, and try to figure out how to, mimic your career in alignment with what they have been able to accomplish. It's also great to have amazing mentors and champions along the way. And as we go through our journeys, right, embrace those challenges and opportunities, even when we do it afraid, right? And, I just really hope that all of this, that my background gives someone out there some encouragement that you really can move in the direction of your dreams, and also find what grounds you, what keeps you grounded and centered as you go through your journey. For me, my faith keeps me grounded. So you find what keeps you grounded as you go through your journey. So let's step into it. So you'd all agree with me that technology has evolved over the past 10 to 15 years, with phones no longer being used just for voice communications. Right at this moment, we have mobile phones that are used to handle very complex multi-application functions, and they transmit and store very sensitive data. And in today's world, where we have hyper connectivity, we have hyper personalization, we have social media, Internet of Things, and the likes, they're all competing for our information and for our data. And all in the bid to make our lives better, make our lives more convenient. And you would agree that all of this comes at a great price if we're not able to properly secure these technologies. And that's where application security comes in. So I did some research and found out that in 2025, we will have about 75 billion devices connected to the internet. And it's also projected that the human population by 2100 will be about 16 billion. There's no doubt here when we look at these numbers that, the devices are obviously taking over the humans, and I mean, like, they're controlling the humans. Because when I think about it, how do I feel when I cannot find my phone after 5 minutes? Our cell phones have become an extension of us, right? And not because that's a bad thing necessarily, but just because of all the benefits and all the applications on them that help support and help us through our daily lives, right? Our communications, our interactions with others, just keeping in touch, and just numerous functionalities that we have on our cell phones today. So as the ecosystem of technology is growing, so are the cyber threats. And the question is, can our cyber defenses keep up with those threats to protect data, to protect the information that these technologies are sharing across the multi-integrations available? Can we keep up with defending these solutions out there? So when we talk about application security and how it's relevant to helping us secure technologies or secure applications, we see that there are a lot of solutions out there that today have web interfaces, APIs. There's a lot of interconnectivity, lots of endless integrations amongst technologies, a lot of technologies sharing and processing data, and obviously lots of bad actors out there trying to get access to this data, trying to compromise infrastructure or exfiltrate sensitive data. So as application security specialist or as an application security pen tester, what our role is and why it's important is the fact that we need to identify vulnerabilities before the bad actors do. We want to protect the web APIs, web interfaces out there, and make sure they cannot be compromised. And also, we want to validate the controls in place to protect data to make sure that they're effective and efficient. And also making sure that all those interconnectivities and integrations are secure. So, when we talk about application security, we're not really interested or we're not really focused on the regular user who would just use an application to do their regular day-to-day, whatever they need that app for. But we're really looking out for the bad actor that wants to compromise data. We want to make it difficult for the bad actors to compromise data to gain access to information that they shouldn't have access to. And by protecting the applications, ultimately, we're protecting the end users and keeping them safe. So I'll pivot and just go into what is the methodology for performing application pen testing or vulnerability assessment. So typically, we start with footprinting, where we're just gathering intelligence about that application or that target that we're trying to assess. And then we go to application discovery, where we're identifying the application ecosystem and the supporting infrastructure. Then threat modeling, we do that to identify the use cases and the abuse cases that can be exploited. Then we enumerate and profile the application, looking for all the domains connected, the IPs connected to that target domain, and the configurations available. And then we perform some specific predefined test cases depending on what we're trying to assess. And we perform our vulnerability assessment or run a scan on that solution if it's applicable. And then we go to exploitation to see the vulnerabilities identified, can they be exploited and how? Once we're done with all of that, we pull all the information together and report. One thing I like to say here is that please do not ever test an application without authorization, because it will have legal implications if you do that. So going to the day in the life of an ethical hacker, or more like what does the process that the ethical hacker or pen tester go through? What does that look like? And throughout the presentation, I'll definitely use ethical hacker, pen testers, interchangeably, because they pretty much mean the same thing. But I won't go into the details of the specifics, but I'll use them interchangeably. So as I stated earlier, we are trying to protect sensitive information from getting exploited. We want to identify vulnerabilities before the bad actors do, and that is the goal of the pen tester. So first off, they start off with defining the scope of their assessment. And what does that mean? Well, what kind of application am I going to test? What is the scope? Is it a web application? Is it a mobile application? Is it an API? If it's a web application, is it just one domain? Are there multiple domains, or is it just one functionality? Define the scope. Once the scope is defined, the pen tester also obtains authorization from the stakeholders to test. And the reason why this is important is because you do not want to test without authorization. You want to make sure that the stakeholders are in agreement with the scope of the test that needs to get executed. Once authorization to test is obtained, the tester then sends out a communication to stakeholders saying, I am starting my tests between this day and that day. That's the duration between this hour and that hour. And also, I will be testing from this source IP and to this destination IP. And all of this is relevant because you do not want to start testing without letting them or notifying the stakeholders prior to testing, because it may send off alerts that may cause other issues. So it's good to communicate prior to starting an application pen test or any testing that you're performing. And once that is done, the pen tester starts performing their assessments. Typically, a pen test would include manual testing and automated scans. A lot of folks feel that like when you're performing a pen test, you're just running a bunch of tools and then that's it, just run the tools and you're done. But no. So pen testing involves automated scans where you actually set up your scans to scan the application. You need to make sure that it is authenticated, the sessions are not timing out, and obviously you do not lose, you do not get locked out of the account or of the application. Then the manual testing really involves you engaging with the application, trying to understand what that application does and trying to figure out how can you bypass the controls that exist or identify control gaps. And manual testing typically will take about 70% of the tests that would typically be performed in an application pen test, while the automated scans would be on an average about 30% of the test scope or engagement. So as the pen tester is performing their pen test, they're also documenting their results, taking their screenshots, documenting their replication steps for the issues they have identified. The next thing is also through the course of the testing, it's great to keep communications open with the stakeholders. For a number of reasons, you want to make sure that they know what the status of the pen test is, how things are going, if there are any challenges or if there are any issues. Typically, you have cases where accounts get locked out or functionality is not working, or there are numerous things that occur during the course of a pen test, or you maybe just worst case scenario, you pull the application down and it's offline and you need them to fix that. So once all of that is done, the pen tester definitely pulls all their information together when they've completed their assessment. They make sure that they go through their checklist to ensure that they've not missed any findings. And then they finalize and send out their reports to the stakeholder. The final step really is to set up a call with the stakeholders to discuss the findings. And it's important to discuss the findings so the stakeholders or the app owners are on the same page with the tester to make sure they understand the findings, they understand the risk associated with the findings, and they understand how to address or remediate those findings. And also, when you're having that conversation, or when the pen tester is having that conversation with the stakeholders, it's possible that they may have compensating controls they've implemented in the environment that the pen tester did not factor in. So this is a great opportunity during the call to discuss what those compensating controls are and what the implications are to the assigned risks of the findings. All right, so moving on to the types of vulnerabilities a pen tester would typically cover. So OWASP Top 10 is, I would say, a very good high-level baseline for software security vulnerabilities or flaws. So typically OWASP Top 10 is a decent place to start, and it's a collation of top vulnerabilities prevalence across the industry over a period of time. So we would typically use this as a baseline. However, OWASP Top 10 is just a subset of many other specific test cases that need to be tested or variants that need to be tested. And they don't go into a lot of details about those specifics. So today, I would like to just step into one of those vulnerabilities just to give you a glimpse of what it would typically look like from a testing perspective. So the one I'll go into is A5, which is broken access control. So broken access control really is when a user is able to access a resource that they have not been authorized to access. So authorization really is a process where requests to access a particular resource should either be granted or denied. So when broken access control flaw exists in an application, it means that a user is able to access a resource that ideally they shouldn't have been authorized to access. And I'd like to state that authorization is different from authentication. So authentication is when you are logging in, providing credentials into a system to access that system. So I would like to go into a little more detail about some access control attacks that we would test for. And like I mentioned earlier, OWASP does a great job for providing or defining that high-level category of vulnerability. But as you would see here, there are a number of control attacks or access control attacks that we can actually try to exploit when we're testing. So the first is vertical access control. And this is where a normal user or a standard user is able to elevate their privileges to a higher level access. So for example, a regular user can access admin functionalities. The second is horizontal access control. That's where a user with the same access level is able to access another user's private information. So for example, I log into my bank account, but then I'm able to manipulate the application to grant me access to another person's bank account details. The third is business logic access control attacks. And this is where you're able to abuse the logic of the application to make it perform an action or a function that it wasn't intended to perform. So those are some of the typical access control attacks that a pen tester would normally go through in the course of their assessments. And then how do they get this done? When we talk about application penetration testing, the pen tester has one major tool that is very critical to getting their work done, in addition to many others. But having an intercepting proxy or web intercepting proxy is a fundamental primary tool that a penetration tester would need to get their work done. And what does an intercepting proxy do? An intercepting proxy pretty much serves as a proxy it sits between the browser and the backend server. So when the browser sends a message to the server, the intercepted proxy sits in the middle of that communication and intercepts that traffic, that HTTP traffic. And the reason why this is important is because the pen tester needs the ability to be able to manipulate, modify the traffic coming through. Typically, you would say, why can't the tester perform all that activity on the front end, which is the browser itself? The challenge with that is a lot of browsers these days, or a lot of, I would say, client-side facing interfaces would have client-side controls. And also, you're not able to see all the information that is flowing through in the communication on the client side that's on the browser page. So the intercepting proxy gives the pen tester all the flexibility they need to manipulate all of that information that is typically not visible to the user from the browser side. So it's important that you're able to get your intercepting proxy, configure it to listen on a local host on a specific port that is not being used on the system that you're running the proxy on. And once that is done, you also need to make sure that you configure your web browser to be able to send traffic to the proxy tool. So you have to configure your network proxy in your browser settings to make sure that it is sending information or sending the traffic to the local host at the port the web proxy or intercepting proxy is listening on. So this is what it looks like. This is what the HTTP request looks like when you send it back and forth. So the top section is the HTTP request header. That is the browser sending the information to the backend server saying, get this URL for me. So we see get and the path or the URL that is being requested. So the great thing is that when you look at this, you see all the parameters on the screen. You look at the screen parameter and the menu parameter. These are great opportunities for the pen tester to interject payload, scripts, whatever they want to interject to see if they can exploit some vulnerabilities. And that's where the benefit of the intercepted proxy comes in. And the lower section just really speaks to the HTTP response header. That's the response from the backend server back to the user. So really, at the end of the day, the intercepting proxy is just one of many tools that an application pen tester will use to execute their test cases, their manual test cases, to interact with the application and try to exploit vulnerabilities, try to inject payload, inject scripts into the request as it's going through. All right, so now I'd like to cover on a high level application security test types, tools, and resources that will be beneficial to get started as an application pen tester. First off, just going through the types of tests that we have for software security or application security. We have the static code analysis. So with static code analysis, you really just have access to the source code, the static code. And this means that this is not runtime code. This is just raw code that you're able to view. So with static code analysis, we typically run automated code scanning tools on the source code to identify vulnerabilities at that level. And also, performing manual code review is also done at the static code level, and also software composition analysis for open source components or libraries that are being used as part of the source code. But our focus today really is on application pen testing. And like I mentioned earlier, app pen testing involves both manual testing and automated scans. So to get started, there are a few tools that would be helpful to execute application pen test assessments. The first set of tools I'll talk about are the dynamic application scanners. Most of the dynamic application scanners I'm aware of are licensed or commercial tools. We have the AppScan, the Web Inspect, Burp Suite Pro, and there are quite a few others as well that I don't have listed here, but most of those scanning solutions are licensed tools. The next set of tools, like I mentioned, that is very critical is the Web Application Intercepting Proxy. We have the Fiddler, Burp Suite, Zap Proxy, and a few others, and all of these are free. You can download them and use them as part of your process of building expertise and knowledge in this space. So some of the resources I think I find very valuable is, there are a number that I've listed here. OWASP, which is Open Web Application Security Project, is a great resource if you want to be in the app or software security space or application pen testing space. I would say that you can, just spend time on OWASP and really dive deep into it. It has lots of great resources. And also they have a vulnerable web application called WebGoats. This really is an application that gives you the opportunity to try to exploit and try to exploit, the known vulnerabilities on the application. It's a really fantastic tool that can help you, in the process of learning how to perform application penetration testing. The other one I have listed here is Hack Me Bank. That's another vulnerable banking application that you can leverage to just get started and just play around and practice pen testing. And also a couple of other resources here. SANS has great resources. They have lots of free webinars that you can take a look at. They also have lots of white papers that are great. And here I have listed the SANS pen test attack surface and tools. This is a SANS poster where it kind of lists all different resources, vulnerable apps, different resources that you can actually look into and just build that, I'll say, set of tool set to get you started into trying to pen test applications that are vulnerable and just trying to get your feet wet, trying to understand how to get those types of testings executed. And I know that there's so many online resources, so many online trainings available that you can take advantage of. One thing I'll recommend is the Web Application Hackers Handbook. I think it is a very thorough book that goes into a lot of details about pen testing. It has a lot of information that I call it the Web Application Hackers Bible, because it really has everything you need to just really get you grounded about pen testing, the different vulnerabilities, how to set up your scans. It is a thorough book that would be very beneficial. So I would like to also cover the core skills that you need to be successful in application pen testing space. So looking at the core technical skills that I think are important or relevant to this space are just really understanding how the internet protocol works, TCP/IP, just really getting into how it works, understanding that, and also understanding how web, mobile, and API communication works. Because as you're testing web applications, you want to know how the communication is flowing, so you know how to interact, how to modify your test cases to comply with those scenarios you're observing in the application. So really just understanding the application interface that you are testing. Also, I would say for anyone in technology, understanding the OSI model is foundational. So really understanding the fundamentals of the OSI model, I think is important. And in this space, definitely you have to understand what application vulnerabilities are and how they can be exploited, how can they be fixed. That is critical. You need to understand that thoroughly. And also, we talked about tools. Tools are great. Tools are only as good as a tester using them, but they are fantastic to make your work more effective. If we didn't have tools, then it would take us forever to complete a pen test. So tools are really great. So really getting to know what tool to use when is important, and also understanding how to use scanners, how to tune them to get your work done effectively is also a great skill to have. And also understanding cloud infrastructure components. With the cloud, there are several components that should be included in pen testing, and the way we pen test cloud environments is probably not the same as pen testing traditional applications. So understanding the cloud infrastructure components definitely is a benefit. So in terms of training and certifications, I'll say yes, continuous learning, continuous training is critical in this space. And also certifications, right? Certifications are great because it gives you some credibility that you actually have you've kind of absorbed the content and immersed yourself in the content. And I'll recommend starting off with the CEH certification, and that is the Certified Ethical Hacker certification. That's a very, very great place to start with, if you're interested in exploring a career in application pen testing. I know this is a very technical field, but you do need soft skills as well because you're interacting with people. So communication is very important. Effective communication is very important, as you will be engaging with stakeholders, engaging with app owners, developers, explaining the vulnerabilities, trying to work with them to resolve issues. So effective communication is critical. And also writing. I think how you write, how you write and draft your report is also very important, as it is the way the developers or app owners will, digest the information you've provided to them and address the identified risk of vulnerabilities. So writing properly is definitely an important skill to have. And also thinking out of the box. I would say that application pen testing is not a science. It is an art, because every application is different. So you need to have the ability to take the foundational fundamental skills and translate that into how it would apply to all the application, the variants of applications you would be exposed to test. So it's important to be able to think outside the box and think creatively when you're performing your application pen test. And also the love for learning. Can't emphasize that enough, because technology is constantly changing, which means we have to continually learn. Several years ago, before the mobile phone came out, no one knew how to pen test a mobile, but then we had to build up a process to get that going. So technology is evolving. We have to keep learning just in this space. So you have to have the love for learning. It is not static. It's continuous learning. And also, it's important to be detailed oriented, because what we do is very critical. We're trying to keep the bad guys out, the bad actors out. We're trying to keep them out. We want to identify vulnerabilities as much as we can within the time frame or time confines that we have to perform an assessment. So we do need to make sure that we are very thorough with the work that we are performing, because if we miss a critical vulnerability, that is not going to end well if it later gets exploited. So it is very important to make sure that we pace ourselves and we are very thorough with our work. That's critical in this role. So the next I have there is resilience. So you have to be resilient, because you have lots of difficult conversations with stakeholders. A lot of times people are not happy that you're finding all these issues just before they need to go live. So that could cause some contention. So you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and having difficult and uncomfortable conversations. And also resilient in the fact that you probably will make mistakes. You probably may fail, but that's okay. You have to be willing and open to learning through your failures and mistakes and growing from there. So that's important. So a few other things that I listed there is definitely join a security community, a security organization, be a part of a security community. I recommend OWASP if you're interested in application security, application pen testing. OWASP is a great organization to join. I know they have lots of chapters all over the globe. So definitely a good organization to join. Also, get a mentor. A mentor definitely would help you navigate your career path, give you ideas, give you suggestions on what to do, what to focus on. So definitely get a mentor to help you get to the end you're trying to reach. So the last thing I have here is find what keeps you grounded and centered, because security or cybersecurity as a whole is they say it's a challenging field, right? So you need to be able to find what keeps you centered and grounded, and that really gives you the tenacity to be able to get through challenges and difficult situations that may occur as you go through your journey. So finally, I'll say that, I implore you, try to make the world a better place. Look inside yourself and recognize that change starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with all of us. So I say, let's keep moving in the direction of your dreams, and let's change the world by making it more cyber safe. And this is all that I have today, and I will pause for questions. Yeah, my favorite book on pen testing will be the Web Applications Hacker's Handbook. That is a great book. It is very thorough, very detailed in terms of just walking you through the steps of getting started. So the Web Application Hacker's Handbook is a great resource to start off with. And you can read the Tangled Web as well. But in terms of getting started, I would recommend the Web Application Hacker's Handbook. Yeah, Violent Python book. I haven't read that one, but I would assume that, yeah, because if you need to do, I'm not sure what the context is, but with pen testing, a lot of times scripting, it's good to have some scripting knowledge. So if that's the context of the book, then definitely worth reading. Oh, yeah. So approach for testing in the cloud. I think for the most part, I mean, it really depends on the components we're testing. When we're testing applications, really pretty much just focus on the functionalities. We focus on additional, especially APIs. I think we really focus on APIs a lot for cloud environments, and also additional cloud storage components that may not be particularly defined as part of the application. So those are some of the things I would definitely include in our testing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you said how far do we go? I didn't read that. So yeah, for cloud testing, we really just focus on, for app pen testing, just focus on the front end. We wouldn't go into the just the SaaS section component, not the IaaS or PaaS. That would be more like the network pen testing. But for app pen testing, we just focus on the front end and just application functionalities and APIs. Okay, great. So there are no other questions. We can end the session. Thank you all so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great evening and afternoon. Bye.